This week's podcast is sponsored by Marantz, who've been delivering advanced home audio innovations since 1953. Marantz audio products have been designed to reproduce music as it was meant to be heard, because music matters. Find out more about what makes Marantz so special at marantzmoments.com. Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 2nd of December. And joining me in this edition, Steve Withers.
An equal amount of blueberries in each muffin.
Ed Selley.
Can you do it with your left hand?
And Mark Botwright.
Leakage, my balls.
Welcome back to the podcast. So we're back. It's a new month. It's the last month of the year. This is not good. So we're going to do best of the month. We're going to talk about Ed's music choices. We're going to talk about films because we've all been to the cinema. Even Ed has been to the cinema this past month. And we're also going to talk about whatever else we think is best of the month. Usually TV shows and that kind of rubbish as well. We've also got two film reviews. We're going to do one as a no spoiler review, which is Knives Out, which is a whodunit. Not nice talking about spoilers when it's that type of movie. We're also going to talk about The Irishman right at the end of the podcast. So if you don't want any spoilers for that one, then we'll tell you ahead of time so you can switch off and go and do something less boring instead. So what has everybody been up to? Mark, you're usually good for this.
I've got some new garden gates. Yeah, touch me. Yeah. Other than that, you know what? It's not exactly what I would call something I've been doing, but I've been trying desperately to try and sort out my enunciation and diction. Because in the past 10 days, I've been accused of being Australian, from New Zealand, and South African.
Do you know why that's nothing to do with your pronunciation or your enunciation, both of which, in my humble opinion, are perfectly all right. You do have a
nasal whine.
There's more of an element of AQI to how you structure your sentences.
That's even worse.
Well, it's harder to get rid of, but that's what the issue is. You do from time to time demonstrate AQI, but we all do. It's unfortunately polluting all of the English-speaking world. Sorry if you're Australian, but nevertheless, it is a problem.
Can I get that removed on the NHS?
No.
What is AQI?
Australian, is it questionative inclination? Yeah. So it's the habit of
Burgundy.
Yeah, exactly. It's a perfect example of it. And ever since Neighbours appeared on British television in the mid-80s, it's become more and more of an issue.
Yeah.
That essentially, in theory, those of us of a Northern European persuasion don't do it, but we've started to do it more. But it's much more prevalent in the Southern Hemisphere.
Steve, you do it when we're in the States. You got a habit to change your accent, and you do it when you're.
I gradually acquire an American accent.
Yes.
In the space of a week.
It depends how much alcohol you've had, but yeah, you do it.
I was thinking about doubling down and keep saying diplomatic immunity.
Look, there are many ways you can take it. So but if you wanted, I'm delighted that you're having a crack at this. But my gut feeling is that more than I don't recall you ever pronouncing anything in a way that I thought was particularly odd or distinctively Australasian. But no, nevertheless, I think that's what the issue is.
I was once asked that myself, Mark, by an American. And I replied by asking him if he was Canadian. He didn't like that.
They get cross, yeah.
Didn't like that at all. So what types of gates? You said garden gates, but what type? This iron, wrought iron, or wood?
No, because there's a north wind that comes down the kind of alley down underneath the carport, so needed some kind of wooden gates there. Right. So nice, just feather edged, nothing too fancy.
Okay, and you're going to paint these, or are you going to,
Oh, I don't know. I mean, we're getting into tricky territory there. I would like to, yes. I think I might go for go a bit fancy. I might even go for a nice grey.
You got to be careful, though. Didn't you devote about a month and a half to painting a bike frame?
Yes.
So
I still haven't built the bike. I chipped the paint before I even put the wheels on.
That was 2 years ago, Mark.
I know, but I've got lots of projects. Okay.
He's got a lot on.
Yeah, okay. Ed, what have you been up to?
I've been working. Today's been very productive. I've written the last of my November reviews. I am acutely aware it is the 1st of December today, but by my own standards, especially considering I've done an extra review at the request of Phil this this cycle. I don't think that's too bad. And even though I've done that 2,200 and something words, I've had time to make some soup and clean the upstairs of the house. I didn't have time to do downstairs, but I can do that tomorrow. So we'll get, a reasonable day.
I need to get some recipes for you because I'm sick of doing veggie soup and potato and leek. That seems to be my favourites at the minute. I need to jazz it up a bit. Whereas,
ironically, I did potato and leek today, but right. that's purely because
standard potato, or are you going sweet potato here?
No. I respect people who seem to be fetishizing sweet potato, but it really doesn't do anything for me. So no,
it's doing something for me right now. I can tell you that.
Yes, we're doing. I did a standard leek and potato. The only concession I made is that as I was feeling a little bit hungover whilst I was making it, I did drop a soft poached egg into the bowl of it, which obviously then bursts and adds a bit of eggy essence to things. But no.
Speaking of poached eggs,
yes,
Ed. Trained chefs appear unable to do the most basic things sometimes. Took the skills test almost to your boil an egg limit, where it's like, poach an egg. And even I know you put vinegar in the water.
Exactly. Well, as I say, that we can discuss that in television, but nevertheless, that's I suppose the other thing I've been doing. I suppose the other thing I have been trying to I remember this from the last time I leased a car, getting them to actually send the finance agreements and stuff like that. They're just sluggish, and I especially dislike it when someone says to me, this will happen by X date, and then it doesn't. It's like, oh well, that was an estimate. Well, if that was an estimate longer. But no, that's all by the by. And as it is now, I'm slightly concerned that I'm going to have to start shouting at the moment because for whatever reason, having spent the entire day asleep on my bed, my cats have now decided to start hurtling around like idiots. So at some point they'll do something stupid. So just forewarned is forearmed in light of editing, Phil. There you go. Okay, good stuff. Not been up to that much myself rather than working and trying to get as much done as I can watching Movie Pile. I've through the Movie Pile.
Well, before you have to give that projector back.
Yeah. I ended up throwing quite a few of the films into the box that they'll never get looked at because they're now they were Blu-rays and you can now get better versions of them. so I thought there's no point watching them. So I got rid of them, and obviously I've got my Sky installed in about 2 weeks' time as well. So there'll be a few things that I'll get through on that as well. So I've been catching up. We'll talk about the discs and that kind of thing a bit later on. But yeah, and we're going to talk about the projector as well. So not a lot that I've been doing, actually. Although I did watch 2 of the documentaries following on from Le Mans, which have turned up on Netflix. Mm-hmm. Very, very similar. Made by the same production company, but one's about Shelby American, and the other is the 24-hour battle or war or whatever they call it. Both very, very good. Very, very good. And obviously tell the true story of the events that the film's based on. But yeah, really, really good stuff. So that's all I've been doing, watching lots of TV for a change. Right, so who have we got left? Oh, Steve, yeah.
Well, obviously, most of my week was taken up with watching The Irishman. Last night I watched Blade Runner because as of today, we're recording this on the 1st of December, Sunday. As of today, Blade Runner now takes place in the past.
Yeah.
So I felt last night was an appropriate time to watch it again, and I got to say it is an awesome disc. So I loved it.
Yeah, it is. Were you expecting to wake up and it was just corrected for you or something?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, there we go. There's my flying car and enormous television.
Interestingly, obviously Rutger Hauer died earlier this year, but Lawrence G. Paul, who was the production designer on Blade Runner and also did production design on Back to the Future, he died this month. So he actually died in November 2019, which is somewhat appropriate.
Well, blimey. Well, I dare say that whilst we're considering that appropriate, he's probably less thrilled about that.
It's inconvenient for him, but I like the
the finality,
synchronicity of it. Yes.
When did Stranger Things 3 come out, Steve? Was that July 4th? Did it actually come out July 4th?
Yes.
All right. I just finished that this week.
Oh, well done.
Right, so I think we're all caught up. We've all been doing really uninteresting things, and hopefully people have fast forwarded at this point. Current competitions, Mark.
Okay, you can win a copy of Dare Gollum on Blu-ray. That one ends 4th of December. You've also got a copy of Clockwise on Blu-ray, also ending 4th of December.
Is that the John Cleese thing?
I'm assuming so, unless there's another one.
I just quite like that film as a kid.
Yeah. We got The African Queen on Blu-ray. That's 5th of December. Catherine the Great on Blu-ray, 10th of December. Star Trek Discovery Season 2 on Blu-ray. That's 10th of December.
Oh dear.
We've also got a... Oh dear, yeah.
Well, not all prizes are equal.
It is Blu-ray though, so it's only...
almost as good as it is on there.
It's almost relevant. Win a copy of Billy Connolly Made in Scotland on Blu-ray.
Hey, that's good.
11th of December. That's decent. We've also got Christmas 4K Blu-ray action bundle from Lionsgate, and that includes the John Wick trilogy, Expendables 1 and 2, Anna, and Hellboy. And you've got till 17th of December for that. Is that the latest Hellboy though? Or...
Yeah, that's the latest one.
Yeah.
Well, you can't have everything, but even
How
so,
come they haven't included Expendables 3?
because that's truly bad. I have to say,
I think it's better than Hellboy.
Yes, I know, but so
Anna.
is diligently reading the back of the containers that the John Wick trilogy comes in. But the Expendables 1 and 2, I have to admit, are perfect guilty pleasure films for me. I thoroughly enjoy both of them a lot.
Keeping on the Christmas theme, we've got Christmas Steelbook Blu-ray bundle from Lionsgate. And so if you like your steelbooks, you've got Sicario, The Cabin in the Woods, Hellboy, Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, and Mechanic Resurrection in that, and that one closes 18th of December. And we've
got
also
to really like the steel containers that they come in.
Some people do, you know.
I know they do. Yeah.
We've also got a 55-inch Hisense 4K HDR smart Roku TV worth £479, and that one closes 10th of January. So you got a bit longer for that one.
That's a good price.
Yeah, very good. And as always, lots more competitions being added daily. So check them out on avforums.com/competitions, and all competitions are open to eligible AV Forums members resident in the UK.
Any previous winners?
Yes, Robot Hamster won Leon 4K. Duff Beer Drinker won Sill and the Devil Seeds Blu-ray. Patty's Plum won Robert the Bruce Blu-ray. And Norlis won Fuller at Fox 5 Films 1951 to 1957 Blu-ray.
Well done to our competition winners. Right, so we'll be back with some hardware in a sec. You can go to sleep now, Mark.
Cheers.
Right, moving on, hardware. We got some reviews, and we also have the last of the Editor's Choice Awards to get through. This shouldn't take very long at all, because there's only 3 of them in the projector section of this. There should have been 4, but the fact is that we didn't see anything between the £1,000 and £6,000 price points. Unfortunately, that one didn't get filled in. But anyway, budget projector of the year for us was a 4K DLP projector. So not true 4K, however, it uses the new DMD DI chip, which is...
there's a bit of confusion there, isn't there? Because there's been some slightly misleading advertising.
There has, yes, and it's because a trade body has said that it is true 4K, that obviously marketing teams rubbing their hands in glee and calling everything true 4K. That's not the case.
It is not.
The DMD is a 1920 by 1080 resolution chip, but what it does is it uses a quadruple flash, and it basically tricks your eye, because it is so fast, into seeing 8.3 million pixels, which is the pixel resolution of Ultra HD. So that's why it's called a 4K DLP
It's basically
projector.
a high-tech modern version of interlacing.
It is basically, and
effectively.
And it works really well. And it works really well with DLP, because DLP is natively quite a sharp technology. It always looks sharp.
Yeah.
You can use a plastic lens with a DLP projector, and it looks almost as sharp as a projector using a glass lens. That's how good the technology is when it comes to sharpness. So they get away with it, and it does look very, very good. You've looked at a few of these projectors, Steve, and I've seen a whole load of them over the years, and they do look like you're watching a 4K projector. They're not native. It's not true 4K.
No, I mean, the panel is not a 4K panel. As you said, Phil, they're either half the resolution of 4K for some of them, or in the case of this one, it's a 1080p panel being shown 4 times very quickly. But whilst it is a trick, it is a trick that works.
Yeah, it does. And the other thing with DLP is they've come on a long way just over the last sort of 3 years. 3 years ago, you were lucky if you had a DLP projector that could reach the Rec 709 HD colour gamut. Normally, they would be short when it came to green and yellow. Yellow would be towards red and green would be towards red, blue. It would be a very, very small gamut. It wouldn't cover the full HD gamut. So never mind covering DCI-P3, it couldn't even cover HD. The projectors have gotten a lot better at this, and the projector that wins, the BenQ W2700, uses a 6-segment RGB colour wheel. It is coated in a certain way that boosts the colour, but it also uses a filter in the light path. So it does cut down on the light a little bit coming from the projector, so it does get a little bit dimmer, but it will cover the DCI-P3 or attempt to cover the DCI-P3 gamut, which a DLP, like I say, 2-3 years ago, you weren't getting anywhere close to that. And this projector is under £1,500. So not only are you getting 4K resolution, you're getting the wider colour gamut. It looks sharp. It handles 24 frames per second material properly. When it comes to HD content, which is going to be the vast majority of content that a lot of people at this price point will be watching, it covers Rec 709, pretty accurate to Rec 709. So for the money, it's an absolute star. The only thing it doesn't do, and none of these projectors at this price point do it, is HDR. They say they do HDR. They have an HDR mode, but you're not talking about anything that looks or even approaches an HDR image. Really.
Yeah, if the definition of HDR is high peak brightness and a wide color gamut, it ain't doing either of those.
No, you're getting the wider colours. You're not getting the brightness, so you're not getting the colour volume behind that either. So while it might measure it in 2D, that it's covering wide colour quite well. Obviously, the luminance part of that is not being covered. But we're talking about a projector that's under £1,500.
In fairness, all projectors struggle with that. I mean, some do better than others.
Yeah, they do. And until the frame adapt came, which we're going to talk about in a second. Even projectors cost £30,000 struggle with HDR and how they tone them up and all the rest of it. So this is a £1,500 projector. It is loud, so you need to keep it away from the viewing position. It has built-in speakers. I wouldn't bother with the built-in speakers. You want to use it with a separate sound system, but it is portable. It's not a very expensive projector, and the bulb should last the life of the projector, as long as you're not picking it up as soon as you switch it off. You can let it cool down properly. If you're going to move it around, put it away in a cupboard or whatever. Fantastic. And the other thing that it did very well when compared to its peers was black levels. Black levels are never good on a DLP. This was a little bit better than normal. So it still wasn't great, but it was more of a projector that I'd be quite happy to sit and watch a movie on, because the blacks weren't that compromised, whereas you will find other DLPs in this kind of price range that are described as a home entertainment projector. They do have really mediocre black levels, but it did okay. Just don't expect the kind of shadow details, mid-tones that you would get on a more expensive model. But again, very, very good. So that was £1,500 and under, the BenQ W2700. Steve owns the next projector. He's spent a year with it, and I guess the good thing with this as well is that you've followed the whole development of the projector for when it's launched, and it's had a few firmware updates over its life so far, and the big one was 3.10 firmware.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the JVC DLA N7B. It won our best 4K projector of 2019. And like I say, you own this projector, so why don't you talk a little bit about it, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is part of the new N series from JVC, so that's the N5, N7, and the NX9, which we'll be talking about in a second. These were the first native, not counting the Z1 native 4K laser projector, which they released a couple of years ago, which obviously is quite expensive. These were the first native 4K projectors from JVC that were in an affordable price range, i.e. less than 10. Well, two of them were less than 10 grand. I use that term loosely, obviously, because the N7 is 8.5 grand, and the N5 is about 6 grand, 6.5 grand.
Yeah, it's about that.
So they aren't cheap, but I mean, you're getting a lot of projector for your money. And I did get the N7 beginning of this year, And I've got to say, I've been really, really happy with this projector. I think it's delivered on every level I wanted it to. Obviously it's native 4K, that's a good start, but it brings with it all the things that we associate with JVC, particularly the black levels. I will admit that the contrast performance isn't quite as good as the previous generation. So if you've got like an X7900, for example, I think the black performance, the black levels and contrast performance on that are slightly better, but it's still really good and better than the competition, in this case, Sony. You've got very wide color gamut. I mean, 100% DCI-P3 basically on the Rec 79 because it's got the color filter in there. That isn't on the N5, but on the N7 you get 100% DCI-P3. Reasonably bright, not as bright as it could be. What's it rated at? About trying to think now, is it 2,000 lumens, 2,100 lumens? I think it is, or 1,900 lumens. Top of my head.
I think it's 2,000, and I think the NX9 was 2,200.
Yeah. But still reasonably bright. And overall, when I first got it, I'm very happy with the performance. The big thing was obviously that when we got to CES, no, not CES, when we got to IFA, JVC announced a major firmware update. Now, this delighted me for two reasons. One, getting a new feature, but two, they weren't going to release a new range of projectors with this feature and then not support people that had already bought one. So this is a change of approach from JVC, because in previous years they generally had a new projector out each year, which has added little features here and there, but it's essentially been similar to the one before. But they have added little things here and there, and sometimes it's a bit annoying if you bought something and then they release something else. You're thinking, oh, I want that. This is different. This is a firmware update for all three projectors in the range, which suggests that they're probably going to run with this particular range of models for the foreseeable future. And why not? They're selling them as fast as they can make them. And this adds frame adapt HDR. So in other words, it analyzes the incoming HDR signal and it adjusts the tone mapping from a scene on a frame by frame or scene by scene basis. And this works really well. I personally think, like I was watching Blade Runner last night, I think this is the best projected HDR image I've seen from any projector at any price point, excluding the one you're about to talk about, Phil.
Yeah.
Personally, I think it's amazing. I mean, the clarity of the image, the colors, the tone mapping, the blacks, the highlights. It's just a superb image, and I'm constantly putting on stuff and I'm being blown away by what I'm seeing. I'm thinking, I watched Hobson Shaw earlier in the week. Again, looked absolutely stunning. So I mean, it wasn't cheap.
How many breaks did you have watching that film then?
How many breaks? No, it was a single sitting. Yes, I will be the first to admit that it's not cheap at £8,500, but I think in terms of what you're getting for your money, absolutely no question in my mind. It is the best projector I've ever owned, and one of the best you can buy right now. Okay,
add another 10 grand to that, and you're talking about the projector that I'm doing my best not to give back.
All that for your extra 10 grand.
Right. So you see, I haven't seen the N7. So I think if you were to put them side by side, there will be differences. Is there 10 grand's worth of differences? Of course not. You're getting into diminishing returns here, and but you have got a bigger lens. So the lens is bigger than the one on the N7. You have THX, which means nothing really, but it is THX certified. And apart from that, a little bit better probably in the cooling, and when you put them side by side, there's maybe a smidge better in terms of sharpness and colour reproduction.
Well, I mean, the glass is where the money's going to a large extent,
exactly.
Isn't it? And it is a really big, it's a really good lens, so you are getting that extra bit of sharpness in there.
It's the one out of the Z series projectors. It's the same lens that was in that. So yeah, you're talking about a serious bit of glass, and it weighs a ton. It weighs an absolute ton.
Now, I mean, they're all big.
Yeah,
well, they're all the same chassis, aren't they?
Yeah.
But the glass is bigger.
The footprint's slightly bigger than the like width and depth. It's the height that's really different. They are a lot higher, and you've got that 7-inch circular area where the lens sits within that. The annoying thing is there's no motorised lens covers or anything like that, which is annoying, especially when you're talking about a really nice bit of glass like this. You want to protect.
I don't know about with the NX9, but I'm assuming it's the same. The N7 comes with like a plastic
thing. Yeah.
clip on, and I'm not putting that anywhere near my lens because I don't like this hard plastic thing you shove on the front of your lens. So I basically just leave it exposed, and then every now and then give it a little dust with a lens cloth. But it is a shame, given the previous generations had a motorized lens, and given that these are not cheap, you thought they could have stuck that little feature in. If only it was only because I'm used to that sound when I turn it on. I mean, when I first got the N7, I was like, I'm used to having had the X7 500 before that. You'd press on and it'd be zzz, and okay, it started up. Now you can sort of basically wait for it to turn on. But surprisingly, given their size and brightness and everything else, they are surprisingly quiet projectors, aren't they?
They are. Although my disadvantage or advantage is that the projector sits directly behind my head. And when it kicks into HDR mode, you do notice, obviously it switches then into the bright lamp mode, which it has to do. You notice the fans a bit more, but it's nowhere near as loud as the W2700 that we talked about right at the start, which is really loud. And once you got a soundtrack playing, you tend to tune it out anyway. It's like if you were living next to a running river or something like that. Your mind tunes it out. So it's no longer there, and the same with this. You get used to it sitting there, you kind of tune it out. It's not that loud or at a tone that's annoying. Yeah, it's not at a pitch.
You've actually got an added problem in terms of noise because unlike the other two projectors in the range, yours has got the NX9, not yours, but the NX9 has got the 8K shift, and that's a physical device you can hear.
It is, yeah. And you know what? I couldn't notice a difference with it. The only thing I could notice was the noise. When it came to resolution, on my size of screen from where I'm sitting, which is 14 feet back from a 110-inch screen, I couldn't notice a difference between 4K and 8K. It's not like moving from 1080 HD up to 4K with HDR and wider color gamut.
Yeah.
You've got the HDR and you've got the wider color gamut. All you're talking about is a jump in resolution that you get up closer to the screen, you can make it out, but it's so sharp anyway with this lens it's on it. The difference is just not there. And I wouldn't be paying for that technology on its own because I didn't think it added anything. And people will say, well, try it on a bigger screen, but then once you get a bit bigger than the screen I've got, I think you then start to lose a lot of the lumens as well. So kind of at the sweet point here. But anyway, I mean, as a projector, it is absolutely brilliant. The black floor is raised slightly, as you've already mentioned. So I have got the X7900 as my reference projector at the moment, which has been sitting in the corner.
Feeling rather unloved.
Because I've been trying to hang on to this one as long as I can. So, yeah, blacks, they're slightly raised, but what really works here is frame adapt, and also the fact that just above black, shadow detail and so on, the depth to the image is fantastic. And of course it keeps that JVC cinematic look, which is really, really difficult to explain, and you try to explain it to people. A reflective image is not the same as watching a direct view TV image, and when it comes to HDR on a projector, there's no way it's going to get anywhere close to how it looks on an OLED or on an LED LCD TV. There are different ways of presenting the technology. But with this frame adapt, it really does make a big difference to how HDR looks. You're getting the color coverage for DCI-P3. It's very, very close to being 100%. Obviously, you're not getting the full volume there. You're only getting the nits value that the projector's capable of. But the tone mapping, and this is the important thing, and I a lot of AVForums members saw this when they went to Dolby as well. It's all about how the content is managed and how that fits to the capabilities of the display. And what JVC are doing here, I mean, it's something that takes some manufacturers a really long time to develop. Obviously, JVC have been working on this behind closed doors, but as a first attempt at doing this dynamic tone mapping, it's superb. It's really, really good.
It's really impressive.
And it just makes the image just that little bit better. But again, is it worth 18 grand? Of course not. It's something that you have to justify that cost. And this projector is designed for a custom installation. It's designed to go into a high-end home theatre. It has the performance to do that. It needs to be used with a scope screen with motorized masking, because what I did notice on my scope screen was that there's quite a bit of lightning round about what I would describe as the raster of the image off to the sides. If you haven't got any masking, there is lighter lights to the side and so on, and that can be a little bit distracting. Like I was watching The Irishman, which is a 185:1 presentation, and
that's always been the case with JVC projectors.
It has been. If you're using it on a scope screen without masking, if you're using it on a 16:9 screen, you're never going to notice.
Yeah, you're not going to see it.
It's just something that I notice. And in terms of the contrast figures, JVC band them around 100 or 1,000 to 1. Yeah, it does that. I measured it, and it hits
their
the
measurements are accurate. They're not hyperbole.
Yeah. So our best premium projector, yes, it's 18K. It's a premium projector, but it wins the award, and that's a DLA NX9. So that's going to stay in my cinema room as long as possible. Until I get the email demanding that it has to come back.
Drag it out of your cold, dead hands.
So that wraps up our editor's choice for projectors. And that wraps up our editor's choice for the year. Now, Kaz is not on the podcast. Unfortunately, he's feeling a little bit under the weather. He's got a cold. But he's going to do the wrap-up for movies and so on for the year. So that's still to come, but that's not part of our editor's choice awards. That's that finished with. And I did mention we were going to do the best of the decade, but Steve's actually pointed out that technically, because he's a pedant, technically it's not this year.
Yeah, we've got a whole nother year to think about this, haven't we?
That's a good excuse.
My understanding is it's 2011 to 2020 would be correct.
Completely correct.
Okay, so
having said that, I did come up with a list. It was bloody hard. I'll tell you what, it's not been a great decade for films. Trying to come up with 10 decent movies was not easy.
It's been a great decade for music and a great decade for 2 Channel. So it was difficult for me for different reasons. So I'm glad I've got another year to hone it.
Well, 3D just didn't make it. It was the big hot potato. It was the big thing in 2010.
Don't bring this up again. Yeah. Please don't bring this up again. It never made it.
Anyway, we'll discuss that on our last podcast of this month and of this year before we head into CES. So yeah, that's the editor's choice out of the way. So let's move on to Steve. Steve, you've never been looking at another soundbar, have you?
Have I never seen another soundbar again? Bloody I've been looking at the Canton Smart Soundbar 10, which in many respects is a very good soundbar. I've actually really enjoyed it. It's basically a single unit. You can buy a separate subwoofer, but it's essentially a single unit when you buy it. It's a 2.1.2 channel system, so there's 2 front firing drivers, 2 upper firing drivers, and a sort of a woofer built into it. It costs £899, which is kind of about the right price point for. This is similar to something like, say, Harman Kardon or Bose or something like that. It's that price point, but the difference is that this at least supports immersive audio, object-based audio. Things I like about it, it's got 3 HDMI inputs and 1 HDMI output. So that's a nice change because quite often they get a bit short-changed on the HDMI inputs on soundbars. It doesn't support EARC, but to be quite honest, with 3 HDMI inputs, you ain't going to need it. They currently pass Dolby Vision, and apparently I asked Canton, they said we are going to add HDR10 Plus as well. We're just waiting to get it certified. So that should pass everything you needed to pass, which is great. It supports Dolby Atmos. One of the weird decisions they've made, and I don't understand why, is it does not support DTSX. Given it's got 2 upward firing drivers, given it supports Dolby Atmos, you'd think why not add the other, and it's £900, add the extra processing for DTSX. I don't know why they went. I'm assuming it's basically because most manufacturers don't really regard DTSX as particularly important, because it is literally only on a couple of hundred at most discs. And any streaming service, it's all Atmos. So I guess they've taken the view that people who are buying it are largely going to be streaming and therefore don't care about DTSX. But unfortunately, from the point of view of an enthusiast, that is a major omission. And it's the only real black mark against this soundbar. I mean, hasn't got a separate subwoofer. That would be nice. I mean, it's got reasonable bass, but it doesn't go as low as you would with a separate sub. But the omission of DTSX is a strange one, and obviously will work against it in terms of the enthusiast, which is a shame because it's a really good sounding soundbar. My other complaint, and this is something that happens a lot with these higher end soundbars, it's got like a really, it looks nice, lovely tempered glass top, which is lovely until you turn the TV on and it reflects the screen. I wish people would just understand, make your soundbars out of matte, make them matte black. because you're sticking them under a screen predominantly.
It would actually be the really BMW did those ridiculous prototypes in Vanta Black.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
That would actually be. It sounds, ignore trying to make it work when it's drizzling and being pooed on by birds. Start making soundbars in that finish. The world will love you.
Yes, exactly. That would be ideal because, you don't want it reflecting the screen. So, but that's something I've seen on quite a few sort of higher end soundbars. They always trying to. It's that thing where interior designers, with home cinemas, where they start putting in mirrors and white walls and that sort of thing. No, paint it black. Yeah. So that aside from the glass top and the lack of DTSX, this is a great soundbar. One of the things it has got that I love is it's got a proper menu system where you can properly set up the speakers. It generates internal test zones so you can set the levels. All the things that I'd like to see a lot of other manufacturers, and I'm talking to you, Samsung and LG, put into their soundbars because, it allows you to set it up properly. And I've got to say, when I had set it up in my lounge, it sounded fantastic with Atmos tracks. Really good overhead effects. Obviously, it's quite front heavy because there's no rear speakers, and it could do with a bit more bass. But there's a subwoofer output on the back, so you can just plug it into it. If you've got a sub available, just plug it in using an RCA cable, and you're away. So overall, I actually really like the soundbar. I think it's worthy of a recommendation for its performance. I just don't understand why they haven't put DTSX on it. That's the basic problem with it.
It's really weird because I've tested the Smart Soundbar 9 elsewhere, and it does sound like the 10 makes a lot more sense than the 9.
The 9 doesn't have
the 9 is just 2.1, and don't get me wrong. Again, beautifully made, nice menu systems. It's got Chromecast, which is quite handy.
Yep, got that. Yep.
But it felt quite spendy for what it was. It's not significantly cheaper than the 10, and it doesn't do anything like as much. I mean, don't get me wrong. Again, I couldn't fault necessarily the way it performed within the provisos of it. It just felt quite expensive for what it is. I'd love to say there was more to it than that. But that's
it's a shame, really, because the 10 does a lot of things right, like the HDMI inputs.
Oh, there's one thing I wanted to check. Does the 10 have the same incredibly infuriating feature that the 9 does on the remote, where the up-down buttons that should be the volume control are input selection, and the left-right buttons that should be input selection are the volume controls? Yeah. If I find the person at Canton that did that, there will be a free and full exchange of ideals, because that is wrong.
It's the same remote
wrong
control
on every level. Stop it. Stop it now.
Yeah, that caught me out a few times when I first started using it. I'm like, why is it changing? Oh, bloody hell.
It sounds like someone screwed up and tried to style it out.
I think they did. But nevertheless,
well, clearly the designers got their hands on this too early in the process, I think, and mucked about with the remote control, put a bit of tempered glass on top of it, and nobody thought for a second, maybe that isn't practical. But so it's one of those things where you think you got so many things right, and you go and drop the ball on some other little things, which maybe with a little bit more thought you wouldn't have done.
Yeah, and you would think that in such a competitive market as well, that you're going to try and cram as much as you can within the limits of what your budget is to build the product. You're going to try and put as much in there as you can, because it is a crowded marketplace. You need to have everything, basically.
Well, the reality is, for the same money as this, you can buy the SL9YG from LG, or the Q80R from Samsung, and they come with separate subwoofers, upward firing drivers, DTSX, and Atmos support. In the case of the LG, it's also got Google Assistant built in. So, you're right, Phil. This is a very competitive area of the market, and there's some very well-specified soundbars out there that sound equally as good, and if not better in terms of bass performance, because they have separate subs and also have more features. So it does better than Powers and Wilkins formation bar, because at least it's got 3 HDMI inputs and an HDMI output. But yeah, it's. I don't understand. I mean, last year LG did the same thing. Last year's LG soundbars didn't support DTSX, which was a bizarre decision on their part, particularly when they were competing directly against Samsung, who did. But yeah, and it's so, like I say, in most respects, this is a well thought out and put together soundbar with a couple of glaring omissions.
Right. Okay. Well, there you go. Review will be up this week at some point. So let's move on to Ed, Parasound. Now, Parasound I'd normally think of as a AV brand when it comes to multi-channel amplifiers, and I'm looking at the name of this. Is this a 6-channel amplifier, Ed?
No.
No. Okay. So
It's
the naming of this is, so you see, I was hoping it was, because then I was going to say to you, the 10-channel version would have my name all over it.
Well, I believe that Parasound can help you with things like that, provided that you have significant amounts of space and you don't mind herniating yourself getting up your stairs.
You missed what I did there with the name.
Yeah, well, probably. But
I got it.
Thanks, Mark.
The thing is, we actually have tested the original HiNT. I don't know where the preceding 4 HiNTs went, but it would appear that the one that we tested in early 2016 was a HiNT 5. Even though it wasn't referred to as such, because this is now referred to as the HiNT 6. But it's a stereo amplifier. But the reason I've had a look at it is 2 reasons. One, as you say, Parasound's quite well known as an AV brand, and the last HiNT, was pretty close to being. It earned a recommended badge, but it had a few things that were amiss with it. So I wanted to have another look. It's also part of a movement that we've been seeing over the last 2 years. It's something that you and I have discussed whilst looking at what we're going to review for 2020. There's a whole category of 2-channel products which are, for want of a better description, they're post-AV. They are clearly and squarely aimed at people who have just decided, do you know what, I don't want a speaker in every corner of the lounge. I would like to return to 2-channel, but I would like to retain some of the niceties that I've come to expect from an AV system. Now, this manifests itself in different ways, be it HDMI ARC and just syncing with your TV remote, which some of the products have. What Parasound have done with both the original HiNT and this one is that it has far more in the way of bass management than you might expect for a stereo integration amplifier. If you look around the back, you will find both a full bandwidth pre-out and a pair of sub outputs, both of which have adjustable crossovers. So in theory, if you were feeling particularly spirited, you could run 4 subs off this if you were feeling bold.
I think that's perfectly normal, not bold.
Well, fine. Okay, well, there you go. This is your amplifier.
No, mine's is the HiNT 10.
Oh, yeah. All right, I haven't drunk enough yet.
Phil's been workshopping that gag all week, and you've blown it for him.
Well, he can edit him dying out on the podcast out, can't he? So that's all fine. No, it's otherwise it's quite similar to the one that went before. You get a choice of analog inputs, one of which is on a balanced connection. You get digital inputs, including USB. What they've done over the original, because they do look very similar, but that's principally because the Halo casework hasn't changed in quite a long time, so they're not messing about with that. It ain't broke, so they ain't fixing it. They've changed the volume control to a rotary encoder system and fitted a volume indicator display because there's no longer a line on the volume knob. And then it would appear they've largely just gone through it and tried to make it better. And you know what? They have. The last one sounded really good provided you use the digital inputs, but was a bit soft, a bit lethargic if you didn't. This one is still really, really good if you use the digital inputs, but it's a lot better if you decide to plug your own stuff into it. And I've done some tests running 2.1. Since the original Parasound came out, we've seen products like the NAD M10, which has got similar levels of bass management and Dirac. So that's, if you like, now a step ahead, but this is still an excellent product if you want to get two speakers and a subwoofer integrated and running together. And it's been a really enjoyable product to live with. It's actually gone through back to back with the name Supernate 3, and on the face of it, they look quite similar because they're both integrated amplifiers. One is 3,300, one's 3,500. In reality, they couldn't be more different. The systems that you would create around both of these amplifiers are, other than the fact that they're 2-channel, they would all have almost nothing in common. So both reviews have mileage in that regard, but trying to make comparisons between them is ultimately fairly pointless. But it's a really interesting product because it does seem to strengthen, let me try that as a complete sentence. It strengthens my belief, and I will be writing a column on this in the fullness of time, that this is a whole new category. Even if manufacturers don't know it yet, they have subconsciously been creating this post multi-channel range of products, all the way from very affordable prices going up to near sort of six-figure price tags. It's for people stepping out of multi-channel at all sorts of different levels. Now, for the perspective of people on this podcast listening who are still remain dedicated fans of multi-channel, that probably doesn't sound terribly encouraging, but nevertheless, manufacturers aren't stupid. They go where the money is, and it does appear that after flirting with extinction for bits of this decade, Two Channel has now decided to up its game and start taking people back from multi-channel, and I think this is a fine example of a product that does just that.
Good stuff. Right, so that review will also be up as soon as Ed puts it into the system.
That's tomorrow. I've got to take some photos of it tomorrow as well. In my defence, it only turned up on Tuesday morning, so I've turned it around pretty quickly.
Yeah,
I've done quite a lot of testing. So yes, but no, that will be up, and there are 5. It's one of 5 reviews from me because Phil said, "Can you do another review?" And I went, "Yeah, probably." So
that's every month, you know. That wasn't just December.
That could be a problem. All right, we'll see how we go.
Right, that's the reviews done. Anything gaming-wise, Mark? I don't have anything in a running order, but I may as well ask you while you're here.
Nah.
Right, okay.
You haven't moved on to Death Stranding yet, the walking simulator.
No, I haven't. I've been largely cursing the fact that YouTube's stupid bloody algorithms spoiled the end of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order for me.
How did I don't understand. What did it just show you a video when you weren't expecting it? Or?
Yeah. So if it's whatever it is, they work with their algorithms. You come up with some annoying little content creator who puts end boss of the moment that so and so turns up, and you just think, why would you do that? And so it soured me.
I don't have this because my son uses my YouTube account. So mine is a combination of random videos about classic cars, dinosaurs, and people commentating through Minecraft videos.
So you want to be very careful with that kind of thing, because I clicked on a My Little Pony video once for my nephew, and it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
No, I know. The thing is, actually, mercifully, because I generally just look at classic car videos, it's perfectly easy for me to set an age limit commensurate with my son, so we're both age restricted. It actually works fine because I don't look at anything remotely contentious on YouTube. It works beautifully. In fact, you know what? From what you've just said there, can I recommend that you all just set your age ratings down to 6 to 7? It's just easier, and you don't see anything horrible. It's very, very nice.
And I was about to say on that bombshell, we're only halfway through. Right, okay. That's hardware done. We're going to play an ident and come back with Ed's Best of the Month. Right, okay. Ed's vinyl album and playlist of the month, and in all seriousness, I really do look forward to this because I get loads of good pointers for stuff. So what have you got for us this month, Ed?
Right, I'm going to just very quickly say it's a triple bill of albums that you should listen to this month, because it's been a really, really good month. So narrowing it down to just 3 was in itself a challenge. But nevertheless, there are 3 albums that have been released on streaming services or physical release this month that I think are well worth a listen. The first is the one that I and ahed about the most, because I know you've listened to it as well, and like me, it's like not necessarily something. It's a good album, but it's not necessarily something you want to make a habit of listening to over and over again. But it's the latest album by DJ Shadow. It's called Our Pathetic Age, and I think if you are a fan of electronic music and this very peculiar niche that DJ Shadow was instrumental in creating, I do think it moves the game on a bit, but not terribly much compared to
probably 18 feet.
Yeah, the last album, The Mountain Will Fall, was really quite radical. It did things that we weren't expecting. I suppose after that, it's not too surprising, perhaps, that he's gone back to his comfort zone. I do think this is a good album to listen to. I think it's interesting, and it's no one else is quite doing what he does, but nevertheless, he has tread these paths before. So make of it what you will, but it is available on all the streaming services to have a listen to. If you want something a little bit more ambitious, and I'm glad I noticed this came out because I'd completely missed it, there is a British electronic artist called Maya Jane Coles, and she has an alternative performing sort of group or affiliation of performers called Nocturnal Sunshine. They released an album called, imaginatively enough, Nocturnal Sunshine a couple of years ago now. That was, 2015. They came out with a second album earlier this month. It's called Full Circle, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. I will say, smack bang in the middle of what is otherwise a very, very good album is an absolute festering turd of a track called Pull Up, but it's only 2 minutes and 57 seconds long, so you can ignore it. It just sits in the middle of the album like, I don't know, putting an enormous lump of ice cream in the middle of fish and chips. It just doesn't sit right. It doesn't work right. It's trying to be contentious for contentious sake. The rest of the album, I think, is absolutely fantastic. It's just a different take on where you can pull electronica and what's going on with it. I think it's particularly good to listen to. It does have a vinyl release, but I haven't ordered it yet, and it's 30 quid, so it's not my vinyl thing of the month. We'll come to that in a bit. And then the final one, if you don't want to listen to something electronic, I have in the past gone on at length about a band called My Baby, and they have released a live set, which they have imaginatively enough called Live. Now, if you're a purist, you may question just how live this is, because it's not in front of an audience. When they say it's live, they are in a studio performing as a band and mic'd as a whole, rather than individually mic'd and put together as you would in a studio album context. So you may query quite how live you find it, but nevertheless, it's a group of musicians who are absurdly talented, having an absolutely fantastic time. It is a genuinely wonderful thing to listen to.
Is it one take?
That is unclear. No, my suspicion is no, not least because there's cuts. Certainly, it cuts between tracks, but it was done in a day. So, right. It depends. It really comes down again to these things. Nevertheless, there's plenty of their stuff live on YouTube, but it's the first time they've done anything along this nature in terms of a higher quality release. So I just think it's a great listen, and it's on the streaming services. It doesn't get a physical release until January, so you might as well just give it. It's about 40 minutes long. Give it a whirl, see what you think. Vinyl release is a reissue, and it's a hat tip to my brother. 1999 by Prince has received the full rework. There are lots of different versions, and they range from expensive to really, really very expensive indeed. The full fat one is 200 quid, but that comes with literally you get the album and then this vast collection of unreleased material that was done at the same time, which has never been released before. So if you are a big Prince fan, it's sort of semi-essential, but obviously they're not stupid. There are slightly less comprehensive versions going down to a more bare bones additional release. But early feedback, it came out on Friday, early feedback from other people who have bought it. It's been done by people who genuinely care and genuinely know what they're doing, and it's a seminal album. It put Prince on the map, so you can't say fairer than that. And then playlists, I was listening to Deezer's 90s electronic playlist the other day whilst I was cleaning the house, and I think you should too if you like that sort of thing. It does most of the stuff that you are pretty much expecting to hear, but then because Deezer is French, it just then randomly throws in stuff that you really weren't expecting to hear. So I thought that was quite good. So there you go. That's me. Okay, good stuff. There's at least two in there that I haven't listened to yet, so I'll go and have a listen to those. Thanks very much, Ed. Are you going to do a 2019 roundup playlist for us on Spotify? Well, I keep saying I will, and then I keep failing. If it happens, it happens, and I'll let everyone know if it happens. It's just, I'm just shit. I'd love to give a more rounded excuse for why it never happens, but I think I'm shit covers the bulk of why it isn't happening. I'll give you a couple of pokes. Try and get a couple of reminders. See if you can get your creative... Don't talk to me about my juices. And Mark doesn't want to talk about his juices either. No, I was just thinking you talking about that sub 3 minute turd. Sounds good.
Right, that's Ed's stuff done. Thanks very much for that, Ed. Right, let's move on. Film review time. This is no spoilers, so this is spoiler free. And I think we're going to be pretty quick on this. I know that myself. Steve, you've seen this, haven't you?
No, I haven't.
You haven't seen it?
No.
Oh, right. So has anybody seen this other than me?
No, but
don't look to me.
Okay. Well, I mean, I am assuming that some of you have seen the trailers. You have a gist of what it is. Basically, wealthy father dies, family are a bunch of assholes. Who killed him? Basically, is the setup. It's a whodunit. Good cast list. Thing is, it's all right. And it was being hyped quite a bit. How it's going to be, the best whodunit in decades, and edge of your seat stuff and all the rest of it. It's functional.
Do you at least find out who done it?
Yes, you find out who done it. The thing is, you find out who done it fairly early on, which I wasn't expecting.
Subverting expectations again. Good old Ryan.
Yeah. Thing is, it's not as clever as it thinks it is, which I think kind of sums up Ryan Johnson. Now, I went into this giving it free rein. I didn't go in with any expectations. I wasn't going to give it be a downer on it just because it was a Ryan Johnson film or anything like that. I actually wanted it to be pretty good, seeing the cast list and the setup for it. And like I say, it was okay, but there's a couple of things about it. It felt like a Netflix movie. It felt like something that was shot for TV because the cinematography was pretty flat. There was nothing that stood out. I mean, it was shot flat, so it's a 1:8:5 ratio, which harks back to the old whodunit type movies anyway. They were never in scope.
Is it the classic setup where, it's stuck within a kind of confined location, that kind of thing? Country house, it tends to be somewhere cut off by a storm, that kind of thing.
So obviously in his mansion, it's his birthday, and he pops his clogs the night of his birthday, and he's found the next again day. So I don't want to get into spoilers because discussing any more kind of starts giving you some spoilers, and I don't want to do that because I think you should go in and let this film tell its story. What I found was that it didn't live up to the hype. It was it was well made, but there was nothing that really stood out. There wasn't any standout performances. There wasn't any fantastic cinematography or anything like that. It was functional, and it's the type of thing that you would watch, I think, on a streaming service, and get just as much out of it than seeing it on the big screen. So it's not a bad movie. It just wasn't a great movie, and it's certainly not as clever as it tries to make out in the trailers and so on. But then I suppose it has to sell itself, doesn't it? But and I wasn't giving it a downer just because it's.
Can you imagine on this trailer actually going out on TV? It's all right. It's not bad.
Yeah.
But in cinemas now.
Yeah, in some ways that still sounds like possibly the best whodunit in a decade, just because there's a dearth of them. So surely, by its very nature, it exists and it's functional.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, it's not a bad film, and everybody. There's no bad acting in it. It's well acted. It's competently put together. I was expecting a little bit more, to be honest.
Is it comedic or is it?
Yes, it really is quite funny at points, laugh out loud funny at points. But again,
I've always struggled with
speaking.
Daniel Craig's American accent.
Yes, and it's terrible in this. Did you see what was the film he was in where he played the guy in the jail? It was Logan Lucky. It's the same accent, basically Southern accent. Yeah, basically,
and it's not very good.
And it's
Except
not
there were
good.
Ewan McGregor and can't do a decent American accent.
Yeah, it's terrible. Absolutely terrible. The movie's not terrible. The movie is actually really quite good, but it's nothing special. And it doesn't live up to the hype that it was given. So anyway, I would probably wait and see it on disc, or I wouldn't specifically go to the cinema to see it unless you've got a few hours to kill and you're close to a cinema.
But on the flip side of that, I wonder if people will head to the cinema to see it just because the longer something that's a whodunit that has any element of mystery is out.
Which is why I saw it opening day.
Exactly. You've got to get there quick these days.
Yeah, with Twitter and everything else. But I've got to say, nobody spoiled it. But then I'm starting to think, did anybody go and see it? Because there was only 5 people in the screen I was in. But the thing was, I had 2 young girls sitting behind me, and they talked all the way through the trailers and everything, and then they started bloody talking through the movie. It's like, oh, who's he again? Or what's it? At which point I stood up and made a point of standing up right in front of them and walking to the other side of the aisle.
They're probably thinking, good, got rid of that old bloke.
Probably. But, annoying.
Everyone was happy.
Yeah, so that's Knives Out. If you're at the cinema and you got some time to kill or whatever, then yeah, it's okay. Go see it.
Better than Midsummer Murders.
I've never seen Midsummer Murders, so yeah.
But you don't know what you're missing.
Okay, so films opening this week. We've got another film review coming. We're going to do that at the end, spoiler of The Irishman. But before that, films coming out this week. Steve, why don't you take us through these?
Yeah, okay. Well, we've got Motherless Brooklyn, which is directed by Edward Norton and stars Edward Norton. And I've got to say, I wasn't too interested in this until I just read the description. In 1950s New York, a lonely detective afflicted with Tourette's syndrome ventures to solve the murder of his mentor and only
Farrelly
friend.
Brothers film, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'll see that. I don't even know why it needs to be 2 hours. Why are films so long these days? Whatever happened to the good old
he's got Tourette's
90 minutes in and out?
Yeah, maybe it's a 90-minute film, but he has a just incredibly long tirade halfway through.
I miss the days when you could, in and out in 90 minutes, job done. 2 hours, 24 minutes for a crime drama. Also has Alec Baldwin in it and Gugu Mbatha-Raw, who I really like. She's a good actress. So that's interesting. Then we have Lucy in the Sky, which is directed by Noah Hawley, who was a showrunner on Legion and has just been given, I believe, a Star Trek film. And this is about an astronaut who returns from Earth after transcendent experience during a mission in space and begins to lose touch with reality in a world that now seems too small. I think this is partly based on reality. There was a NASA astronaut who having an affair and trying to get her lover's wife murdered. So basically, she comes back from space and loses it. That's got Natalie Portman and John Hamm and Zazie Beetz in it.
I do notice that Natalie Portman has been the go-to for people losing it ever since Black Swan.
Black Swan. And finally, Jumanji: The Next Level, obviously the sequel to Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, with The Rock and Jack Black and Kevin Hart and
Karen Gillan.
Karen Gillan, thank you. Also, they're joined by Danny DeVito and Danny Glover. And looks reasonably fun in the trailers. I mean, we didn't need another one. I thought the first one really told a fun story and tied it up nicely at the end. But obviously made $1 billion. Therefore, there was going to be a sequel.
It was a big smash when everybody wrote it off, because we went to see it in Vegas, didn't we?
Yeah, and I really enjoyed it. I think it's a really good film.
Yeah.
I think it. I really enjoyed that. It was one of those, because we went in with low expectations, and actually it was great. Also, seeing it in Dolby Cinema was pretty good too. So this obviously is more of the same, really. There are a few twists on it based on the trailer in terms of who's playing which characters in the game, which might make it more interesting. But like I say, I thought the first one was fantastic, and it ended, it tied everything up nicely at the end, and it was quite emotional towards the end. I thought it was a really great movie, but $1 billion, you're going to make another one, aren't you?
Yeah, I've already got my ticket. So there's preview screenings Saturday, Sunday, so 7th and 8th, and then it opens
actually opens the following.
Opens
Friday.
on the 13th, so that's the Wednesday, I think.
No, Friday the 13th.
Oh yeah.
What month are you looking at?
Sorry. Yeah, it does. It opens the following Friday. So if you want to see it early, it's 7th and 8th preview screenings at certain cinemas. So I'm going to go and see the early morning one because it's Christmas and it's a Metro Centre. So
I'll go and see the week before Christmas. I think that'll be fun.
Okay, good stuff. So that's films coming out. Films of the month. I did really well in November. I absolutely nailed it when it came to my Limitless card.
Yeah, I'm going to get rid of mine. I'm not using it enough.
I went to see Midway, Knives Out, okay, and Le Mans 66. And Le Mans 66 wins it for me. Absolutely fantastic.
Yes, it was simultaneously the best and the worst film I saw in the cinema this month. So well done them. No, I enjoyed it.
Well, the thing is, Ed, it got you out to go to this cinema.
Yeah,
so
well, yes. To be fair, I will be going. I need to get everyone's expectations lined up neatly here. I'm not going regularly, but now I live a vast distance closer to a cinema. I will go more often than I did. So yeah, I mean, as I say, I believe I'm off to see Star Wars. I think whether I like it or not. So yeah, I'll be going a little bit more often, but nevertheless, no, I enjoyed it. I don't understand Cineworld's beam the picture up the sides of the cinema game, but that's by the by. The film itself managed.
Oh, it's one of those films, is it, with the side bits?
Yeah, it was weird, but by the by, that was all fine. I enjoyed it. It was good. You know, again, if we're criticising Daniel Craig for weird accents, I mean, Christian Bale had about 38 of them in the film, but nevertheless, it was all right.
Yeah, but at least you could understand him, because if you listen to the real Ken Miles, it's very, very difficult to understand what he's saying.
Was he from the Black Country or something?
Yes, he was from Greater Birmingham.
Yes, and he spoke out the side of his mouth as well, so very slurred.
It just annoyed me that they didn't actually call Christian Bale's character Terry Teabag at any point. I just think that's a great name.
Yeah. And like I say, there's 2 documentaries, so if you like the film, there's 2 documentaries on Netflix at the minute. Go and watch them. What was your film, Steve?
I'm in the cinema this month.
All right, okay.
Oh, right,
that's unusual.
That's why I'm getting rid of my card.
Right. Yeah, but you're going to go and see the Star Wars film at least.
Yeah. I've
times,
already got that booked. And I'll go and see Jumanji, but I'll cancel it. And I mean, because I basically don't go that often now. When I do, it's to the Cardiff IMAX, which is only about £8 a ticket, so I'd have to go like 4 times to make it worth my while.
It's a fair point.
Yeah, okay. So that's our film of the month. Discs released this week, Steve, or I've just noticed what's coming on 4K, although you've probably already got this.
Hobbs and Shaw.
Yeah.
Yeah, it comes out in the UK tomorrow, Monday, but I got it from the States a couple of weeks ago, and I've already watched it.
He's already very sore.
I was just going to say it'll be worn out.
It's a cracking disc. It's a cracking film. I mean, it is about half an hour too long. I could have done without. It was probably spent a little bit too much time in Samoa, but it's the first hour and a half.
Well, seemingly the movie finished before they went to Samoa.
Well, if you've not seen it.
Oh no, I've seen the film.
A major action set piece in Chernobyl, basically,
yeah.
And you kind of think like, that's a good place to end the film. Oh no, we've got another half an hour to go, another 40 minutes still to go. But the first hour in particular, I really enjoyed. It's comedy. They're playing off against one another. It's fantastic, and there's some really, really genuinely funny jokes. The action's well choreographed by the guy that made Atomic Blonde and the first John Wick movie, and I think it's a great movie, and it looks and sounds fantastic on 4K disc. Also out this week, Watchmen. So this is apparently this has got Dolby Vision this time, which is different from the US release that came out earlier, according to Kaz. I must admit, I wasn't aware of that, but I have seen my US copy, which I had a couple of years ago. And it looks pretty good. It's a Zack Snyder film, so they tend to be quite stylized in terms of their appearance. A lot of contrasty images. Crush Blacks is deliberate, and it's quite grainy in places.
Which
but
cut is
deliberate. It's the ultimate. What do they call it? The ultimate cut, or the one that goes on for 3.5 hours.
Oh God.
We also got coming out on disc on Monday, 7 Worlds, 1 Planet, which I don't know if you guys have been watching it, but I've been watching it on UHD, in UHD and on the iPlayer, and it is stunning and really good. And we also got Easy Rider coming out, and I'm not going to be getting this, the final season of Game of Thrones. They can stop that one right up the jacksies.
Sit on the fence, Steve, why don't you?
On BD, we've got obviously Game of Thrones again, because it's available in 4K and Blu-ray. Although I noticed, I think if you've been collecting the, as I have up until now, the steelbooks, the last steelbook, it looks like it's they make you buy the 4K version if you want to get the last steelbook rather than just Blu-ray. But that's out on Blu-ray as well as 4K. And then we've got On the Waterfront, courtesy of Criterion. There's Fistful of Dynamite, which is if you haven't seen it, is a late entry by Sergio Leone. Originally, he wasn't going to direct. I think originally it was supposed to be directed by Peter Bogdanovich, but he ended up directing it. It's called A Fistful of Dynamite in this country. In America, it was called Duck You Sucker. In France, it was called Once Upon a Time in the Revolution, which actually is a better title. And that's about a bunch of guys running around in the Mexican Revolution, essentially trying to rob banks, but ending up by accident becoming heroes of the revolution. Also out on BD is Angry Birds 2.
Hooray!
Okay. So, disc of the month. I've actually bought quite a few discs this month, but they're all old discs. Old films. They came out this month. So, in no particular order, because I think they're all fantastic. The weakest of the bunch was What a Wonderful Life, but it still looks fantastic, black and white.
It's a one.
That's what I said.
What a Wonderful Life.
Did I? Oh, sorry.
You're thinking, what a wonderful world.
Sorry. It's a Wonderful Life.
It looks good for a film shot in 1946.
It does, yeah. It looks fantastic. It really does. They've spent the time on it, and it does. It looks great. It looks superb. Also, Wizard of Oz. I had to buy it because they've been working on it for forever, and it's absolutely stunning. I watched it on the OLED and on the JVC projector, and it just looks stunning. I mean, the makeup, you can actually see the makeup.
See every freckle on her face. You see the plastic leaves in Munchkin Land. You can see the
green paint of the
green
witch.
paint on the witch's face.
Yeah, I mean, it's super.
The detail in the makeup on the scarecrow, where you can see the sort of the hemp cloth in his cheeks.
Yeah.
The rust in the Tin Man. Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. I love the scene. The scene when she first goes into Oz, and so it cuts from being black and white footage to a black and white set. And if you watch carefully, it's really clever the way they do it, because it cuts to the scene from behind her back, and that's actually a black and white set. They're shooting on color film at this point, and pretty sure color, but there's a black and white set. It's a double in a black and white dress, and then she pulls open the door and moves off camera for a second, and then Judy Garland comes into frame in a color dress carrying Toto and walks through the door, and the camera follows you through the door and into the full color Munchkin Land set, and it's really simple effect, brilliantly done. But the effect is amazing. Yeah.
It looks absolutely sublime. If you want to see what can be done with stuff like that, and they've been working on it for years. I mean, they did the 8K scan years ago, so they've been working on it a long time. It looks amazing. But the best looking disc for me is The Shining. I hadn't seen the film for over a decade. Watched it on the JVC. It is pristine. It looks like it was shot yesterday. Even the 70s interiors and 70s carpets and his Apollo 11 jumper and the detail, it just looks like it was filmed yesterday. It's absolutely amazing. And I wasn't expecting it to look as good as that. And like I say, it's been at least a decade since I last saw the film. It's another must-have on 4K if you're a fan of the film. Looks absolutely pristine. And I forgot I have bought one recent film, and that was Rocket Man. Not an Elton John fan, but I absolutely loved the film. I thought it was great. I thought it was really well done. The soundtrack is stunning, absolutely stunning in Atmos. So that's my picks. But my film of the month, disc of the month, would be The Shining. Even though every one of them is worth picking up.
Before.
Sorry?
Even though it came out the month before.
Did it come out? No, I thought it was this month. I bought it the first week. I'm convinced.
There's always a bitter aftertaste with you, Steve. Isn't there?
There is. He has to be a pedant. Yeah.
Did we not review it? I'm just looking through the reviews. Did we not review The Shining?
Yeah, it's not that important. Anyway, what was your disc, Steve?
I enjoyed Yesterday, which has got a lovely native 4K image and Dolby Atmos soundtrack. That was a fun movie. Had its issues, but generally I enjoyed that. I thought Spider-Man Far From Home looked great, although unlike Kaz, I felt that the Atmos mix lacked, although I got the American disc, maybe the UK disc is different, but I thought the Atmos mix lacked some of the bass I was expecting from having seen it at the cinema. Got Apollo 11 on 4K disc now. I had the Blu-ray from earlier in the summer. I've got to say, I'm not a big fan of the 4K they seem to have the color gamut seems to be slightly overblown and pinkish for some reason, and there's a lot of crush in the black. So I think maybe that wasn't the best HDR release, although apparently that is what it looks like on streaming services as well. So I think it's just not a great HDR grade. But my film of the month for picture and sound, disc of the month for picture and sound, is The Lion King. I've got to say, I wasn't expecting much from this, having obviously seen the original animated film. The CG version is almost a shot-for-shot remake at times, but I did thoroughly enjoy it actually, and it does look and sound stunning. Okay,
you were right. Shining was 6th October and 31st October for Wizard of Oz, but I didn't get them till November, so they're my discs of November.
Well, 31st of October, we can let that slide. It's only a day.
Yeah.
But Shining was a long time ago.
It wasn't. It was the 6th of October. It's not a long time ago. Jesus.
2 months.
Just because you're getting old. Right, so moving on to streaming. What's coming out, Steve?
There is one film coming out on Netflix, I guess on Friday. That's when they usually release all their new films. Marriage Story, which stars Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson, about a couple's marriage, or the disintegration of their marriage, which actually has been getting really good reviews on its limited cinema release. So I'm looking forward to that. Actually, I think I'll watch it over the weekend.
Okay, good stuff. I'm sure there's others, but that's the only one that we're aware of. These things just tend to drop sometimes. Poor Kaz, Friday mornings, ends up.
That's why he's not on his podcast. We've killed him watching all those TV shows.
Well, he's now got an Apple TV box, so he can do Apple TV.
Yeah, I know. He's
Plus.
been piling his way through all the Apple stuff now.
Yeah, right. So, let's go into our TV shows or streaming shows or whatever of the month. There's quite a few to get through. I'll go first, if that's all right, because I'm sure I'm going to mention stuff that nobody else will mention. With me, it's normally documentaries, so there's two decent things on Netflix. Toys That Made Us, season 3, I think, now. Anyway, new episodes, really quite interesting. I like the way they do that. And I've also started a new series called Movies That Made Us.
I saw that.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
So the first...
I haven't started yet.
Yeah, so Dirty Dancing, Home Alone,
Die Hard,
Ghostbusters and Die Hard. And they're all really well done. All nice behind the scenes, retrospective interviews, all that kind of thing. It's really good. I went through the whole season on Saturday morning, I think. Like I say, there's only 4 episodes, so got through that quite quickly. Get Rich or Try Dying, which was a documentary on BBC, basically about pop stars that pop their clogs and make more money now they're dead than they ever made when they were alive.
I accidentally watched that.
Accidentally watched it. Yeah, did you enjoy it?
I did. I think that Bowie gets more credit for...
Watch what you say here.
Yes, I know. It's in so much as most other people don't really put any significant planning into their death. Bowie comes across as being some sort of savant. But I think that there's also an element he did.
Come on, he dropped an amazing album on the day he died.
I wasn't talking about that. It was the leverage Bond thing he did.
That was well ahead of the game.
I know, but that could have just as easily been a cataclysmic failure. So there was there was risk to it. But no, it was a good program. And it does suggest that we will be treated to new Prince stuff probably for the next 15 to 20,000 years.
I said Prince was ridiculously prolific, so there's vaults of stuff to release.
Oh no, but he lost the key to the vault.
Yeah, and then the unfortunate thing is there's no will either, so it's all going through
probate
at the moment. So depends who gets their hands on it as well, doesn't it? That was really interesting, that programme. So if you haven't seen it, it's still on the iPlayer. One that Steve mentioned was the 7 Worlds, 1 Planet, UHD HLG. It looks just utterly fantastic, but these things always are. What else did I watch? Britain's Biggest Warship Going to Sea. I've actually found that really interesting. I don't normally like these reality things, but the way they're trying to land the new aircraft onto the aircraft carrier and that kind of thing, and it was doing a lot of stuff over in the States and the relationships with seemingly our closest ally and all the rest. I just found it really quite entertaining. So that was 3 episodes, new episodes there. Like I say, I caught up with Stranger Things 3. And I think that's about it, really. That's it from me.
Steve?
I'm enjoying his Dark Materials.
I lasted 10 minutes.
What?
I lasted 10 minutes with that. I just thought, no, I'm not going to enjoy this.
Okay, well, I've read the books, so maybe that helps. But I'm enjoying that. I think that's
Get
good
you.
adaptation.
We got
Way
ourselves a
better
reader.
than the film that they did. Film that they did.
No, what put me off was
ago.
the fact that they've all got these animals, and I just thought,
Demons,
I know where this is going. I can't be arsed with this, and I switched off. And the same with War of the Worlds. I lasted a bit.
No, War of the Worlds is not good. That's a massive disappointment.
I'm debating whether I'm debating.
There's only three. I'm going to watch it tonight because it's the last bit. But I've got to say, I don't know how they managed to ruin that. I mean, it's a good.
No, I do know how they managed to ruin it. The thing is, you can play it one of two ways. You either are absolutely faithful to it and essentially limit everything to just an arc around London, or you just take the premise of it and do something much more international, like Spielberg did. Yeah. When you try and do some sort of bastardized mess of both of those things, it doesn't appeal to any. It doesn't successfully be either of those things. So
it was the special effects as well, and you could tell where they were. It felt like Doctor Who. I'm sure Kaz said that in his review as well.
I think that's actually doing Doctor Who a disservice because the most recent season of that had some really impressive effects in it.
Well, look, I'd say I'm 2/3 of the way through, so I might as well inflict the last of it on me.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it is a shame because obviously they're getting a lot of pressure from the likes of Netflix originals and all the rest of it, and new streaming services.
His Dark Materials, which is a co-production with HBO, that's got top draw production values. Because things like the demons, I mean, like you said, Phil, I mean, they're animals, but clearly they're animated, but they look photoreal. I mean, they've obviously spent quite a bit of money on that, and they've got a solid cast. BBC, The War of the Worlds, it just feels like, if you're not going, why bother? I mean,
the biggest right. There's two problems with, and I don't think it's as simple as saying the special effects don't look that good, because the special effects in the concept of a TV program, they all right. There's a couple of problems. Lots and lots of people have read the book. Mm-hmm. And everybody has a different take on how they think a Martian fighting machine should look. And then if you don't, you've got that utterly iconic artwork from the Jeff Wayne version. Yeah. So anything that deviates, if you actually, sooner or later, somebody somewhere is, now especially we've got the technology that we have in terms of rendering things, someone is actually should sooner or later try and make one of these things move as Wells describes them moving, which is not in any way ponderous. It's a tricky thing to do, but it's not impossible. Alternatively, just go with the full-on 70s prog horror show of the album and just run with it, because that looks amazing.
For me as a kid, I watched the 50s film over and over. I was obsessed with that film. The one with the hover.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with that film. Version. Yeah.
Even though you can see the wires holding up the bloody...
Yeah, it's part of the magic.
Well, I think Spielberg's take on it was absolutely brilliant.
Yes.
I think
it's really underrated.
I have some grave issues with it. I disliked. If you took, essentially, as I say, you can take the story and do different. I just saw some of the bits they took were a bit odd to take, but in terms of the air of menace, it's untouchable.
I think it's War of the Worlds filtered through 9/11, and I think that was clearly their approach, and I thought they delivered that ground level view of the carnage extremely well.
Yes,
and also I like the fact that Tom Cruise's character is a bit of a shit.
He's
really.
A colossal arsehole. Yes,
and he's happy to play it that way. So
I do like that because normally with these films you get from the point of view of the people who know exactly what's going on. The head of the army or whatever. Whereas he's just a common everyday arse, as you say.
You just like him, Phil, because he owns a Mustang.
I wasn't going to mention that. It's funny how end of the world stuff, they all drive Mustangs as well, because Will Smith had a Shelby GT500 at the beginning of, when he was in New York.
Well,
I Am Legend.
It's because they're so mechanically simple. They're able to survive working in the apocalypse, and you can run them on gin. So,
right. So are we done with
my
TV?
choice of TV series of the month is hands down Apple TV's For All Mankind. Which essentially is set in an alternative universe where the Russians beat the Americans to the moon by a couple of months, and the space race doesn't end. and it basically continues on. It's a combination of based upon what NASA was planning before the budgets were cut by Nixon in '69, in terms of moon bases, going to Mars, etc. And it kind of takes that and runs with it. But I'm absolutely loving it. I think the effects are top notch. The stuff on the moon, for example, looks brilliant. They've clearly spent a load of money. It's done in 4K, Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos, and it's done by it's created. The showrunner is Ronald D. Moore, who did Battlestar Galactica. The Battlestar Galactica reboot, and it's a fantastic series, and it helps if you're a space geek and know about this, but for me, I think it's brilliant.
You're not one of those, are you, Steve?
No, he's not. Mark?
For me, it's not a series, but the one-off Rich Hall's Red Menace.
I really enjoyed that. That was great.
Yeah, all of his kind of shows for BBC Four have been great, but
his one about presidents was really good because it made you feel slightly better about Trump because you realise there have been some right wrong ones have been in the White House in the past.
Exactly, and his shows they kind of feel part lecture, kind of part documentary, and part kind of almost like Bill Hicks rant. Yeah. It's kind of dripping in sneer and derision, but he's got some very unique takes on parts of history and also the use of stock footage. And facts that you otherwise have never heard. Things like the amount of comic books sent over to US soldiers and stuff like that. It's got a lot of interesting points there. I think it kind of falls sometimes down into the area of downplaying the threat of Russia in the sense that just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. And you can kind of draw a parallel maybe with China currently, but the film and pop culture references and just the way he ties everything together, it's just really smart TV.
There was a couple of them at the same time, wasn't there? Because there's one about Britain's nuclear war or something. I'm trying to remember what it was now. What the soldiers
was that the Portillo's Hidden Britain one? Because that was very, very good. I mean, quite the transformation of Michael Portillo into beloved television personality is one of the more unexpected narratives of the last 15 years. But there you go.
No, it was Arena. It was called A British Guide to the End of the World.
Well, there was an equally good one of all places on Channel 5 done by Portillo, where he visited that weird island off the coast.
He's reinvented.
Don't call the Isle of Man.
I've completely forgotten he used to be a minister.
Yes, and not a particularly popular one either.
No, not all the time.
I've just had a couple of reminders as well. So the Berlin Wall, John Simpson's thing on BBC Four again was absolutely superb, covering the actual events, what led up to the wall coming down and all the rest of it. And because I was a fan of, forgotten the name, but I wasn't that big a fan. I can't remember the name of it now. What was the one with Tony Robinson when they were at
Time Team?
Time Team. Digging for Britain's back with Alice Roberts. She's quite nice. It's back, new 4 episodes of local digs, or digs around Britain anyway. It's quite interesting if you're into that kind of thing.
Well, there have been some cracking ones, as you say, about the Berlin Wall on iPlayer still, and I think it's still available. Are all the ones on Spotlight on the Troubles regarding Northern Ireland?
Yeah, that was fantastic
from October.
Series. Yeah,
and it's just really, really good TV. Just informative. Kind of it deals with the subject in the right way. In the it's kind of holding it at arm's length at the right moments, not getting too emotional, and kind of it analyzes the key moments that when things escalate and how kind of you just kind of watching it like it's a car crash. You're thinking, how did things go so badly wrong? But yeah, it just there's so much information in each episode. It really is good.
Well, there you go.
We haven't heard from you, Ed.
No. There's a lot of overlap, but I think Steve's politely not mentioned MasterChef, so I will. Again, it's not doing anything new. It's the same basic premise as it always is, but in not messing with the premise, it's just tremendously satisfying. And there's been some particularly evil skills tests this time round.
Not necessarily. I mean, make a ham and cheese toasty. That shouldn't be too difficult.
But again, it's the subversion of expectation. They're going, oh God, what exotic shellfish am I going to have to bisect? Make me a sandwich. Oh shit! And then you just go to pieces.
They go to pieces. It's hysterical.
Do they make their own hollandaise sauce?
They had to, and they didn't do it very well.
Have my sympathies on that.
Yeah, that is not easy, but
nevertheless, there are
some
some very strong people who have made it through to knockout week. I believe whoever wins it will have undoubtedly earned their place in doing so. And yeah, if you like that sort of thing, and I love it, then fine. I can't imagine it's for everyone. I would also. It finished in the middle of November. It's done now, but there was another series of Taskmaster, and it's still just a wonderful,
isn't it?
Sorry,
that's moving channel.
Now you see, this is what worries me, because apparently, yes, it is, which is why there was no trailer for the next series, which is what Dave's been doing. This is a ridiculous thing to say, because we always criticise the BBC of not having that much money, but compared to Dave, they do. If it does go to the BBC, they must maintain the fact that it's done largely on a shoestring, because what makes it fantastic is the focus on the people themselves doing, and it's the opportunity for comedians to demonstrate that they can be at times, spontaneously and genuinely funny.
Clueless.
Bless him, David Baddiel is still a person I like very much, but he was utterly hopeless. But every time I've watched Taskmaster, one or more of the comedians involved in it has always gone up in my estimation. I have periodically found Ed Gamble quite funny, but he was brilliant in that. And Rose Matafeo is very, very funny as well.
It fits Dave as a channel, though.
It does, and it's a real shame. But equally, if a program is successful, of course it deserves a wider audience and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, it was an excellent piece of television. And because I managed to completely miss Elementary being on Now TV, because I was moving house, it's reappeared. Most of the seasons have reappeared on Amazon, and hopefully that means that some of the others will appear in due course. But with the fragmenting of streaming services, that could be a forlorn hope. Who knows?
Okay, good stuff. That's TV's done. TV show's done. Right, so we're just going to finish off with our quick spoiler review of The Irishman. If you don't want to hear anything about it, if you haven't seen it yet, now's your time.
Spoiler, Jimmy Hoffa disappears.
Now's the time for you to switch off, and we'll catch you again next week. And if you're still here, so I've
Jimmy
seen
Hoffa still disappears.
I haven't. To be fair, I haven't seen it. Really, I very briefly fired it up.
If you've ever seen a Scorsese gangster film, you've seen it.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah.
Basically.
I'm working my way through. When I saw the runtime and I started watching it and the pacing, I just thought it feels like a TV miniseries or something. So it's easier taken in little kind of.
I'm pretty sure just because he was
episodes.
making it for Netflix, he figured, I don't have to rush. Obviously, if that was meant to be a proper wide theatrical release, he would never have released it 3.5 hours. He'd have timed it up and cut it down to less than 3.
You could cut a good hour and a bit.
There's a scene
out.
where they leave a hotel room and the camera just sits there on the door that's been closed for about 5 seconds. You're thinking like, no, mate, just cut as soon as that door shut. There was no need for that shot to keep going on and on and on.
Yeah.
It did feel. I mean, the pace was, pace is always subjective.
Pace was all over the place, really. To be honest with you,
well, it wasn't. It was all over the place. I mean, it's clearly he wanted to take his time. It's the problem is
it was self-indulgent, Steve. Really, if you look at it with a critical eye, which I'm not saying everybody will, but if you look at it with a critical eye, pacing is a lot of things, and you could have told that story really quite tight. At an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours.
2 hours, you could definitely tell the
2 hours, you could have told that story, because there's nothing special goes on, really. And technically, it's brilliant and all the rest of it. There was no standout, anything that really sort of stood out as he needed to take the time to do that. Like you say, he knew it was for Netflix, so he was being a bit self-indulgent, I think. That's not to say it's a bad film. It's just. It was too long, and when I mean with pacing all over the place, I based that on my watching of it. So just before he takes the telephone call to become Hoffa's bodyguard, at that point it had lost me. I was fed up at that point. I was bored with it, and I stopped at that point. But then I went back the following night and went in at that point and seen it all the way through from there, because it actually picked up from that point. It had more to say about itself, but it still had these little self-indulgent things, like you say, the camera lingering longer than it should, scenes that could have been 2 or 3 lines were, full
is that because
10-minute
it's
scenes.
Kind of his last kind of shot with these actors and the last time he's going to tell, a story like this with them. So he can't cut too much from it. He, almost feels a duty.
That's what it felt like. Because as they say, I mean, I've never made a feature film, but as they say, the hardest thing, and sometimes the worst thing about making films is that you leave the best stuff on the floor, cutting room floor, because while it's great and you're maybe getting the performance of a lifetime from that actor, if it's not moving the story on, if it's not, telling the story the way it should be in terms of pacing, that's why it gets cut and left on the cutting room floor. And it feels like he's avoided that. He's taken full control and he wants everything in there. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing and he shouldn't have done it. It's just, it makes it a long, ponderous watch. And personally, I don't think the material stood up to it. There's a good hour and a half, 2 hour movie there, but at 3.5 hours.
I don't think it feels like a film.
Length. I don't have a problem with the length. I thought the story was interesting. The idea of, for those that don't know, it's based on a book called I Hear You Paint Houses, which is basically code for you're a hitman. And if you also say, I do my own carpentry, that means you get rid of the body.
What does it mean if you put down your own shed base?
Long-term storage, I assume. So I don't have a problem with that. The fact it's Scorsese back in the realm of gangsters is again a joy. Before, literally 2 days before, I watched Goodfellas and Casino, which obviously wasn't necessarily a good idea because compared to those two films, it felt like the pacing did feel geriatric. It did feel like an old film made by an old man, because you watch Goodfellas and Casino and it rattles along. Those films rattle along at an incredible pace. There didn't seem to be any of the great music that was in, perhaps because of the time period, but there was the music you associate with Scorsese films seemed to be missing from The Irishman in the sense if you watch Goodfellas and Casino, particularly Goodfellas, I mean the score is an integral part of the story, and I didn't get the same feeling with The Irishman.
It's tougher to place the eras, though, isn't it, as well?
Unless it covers quite a long period of time as well. But it's like Goodfellas to a degree. Yeah. But I just felt that obviously Joe Pesci back, fantastic. He's only made two films.
He was the best thing of it.
2 years. He's the best thing in the film.
He's absolutely.
You got Harvey Keitel doing his first film with Scorsese since The Last Temptation of Christ. You've got De Niro doing his first film along with Pesci since Casino in 1995.
De Niro's second best in this, but he's so watchable.
And you've got Al Pacino doing, I think, his first film with Martin Scorsese, if I'm right. So, the cast, wow. The big problem is that he's got 70-year-olds spending the majority of the film playing 40-year-olds. And whilst they can de-age their faces, they move like 70-year-olds.
That attack.
In the thread to the review, Kaz review, there's a scene where De Niro beats up a greengrocer for hitting his dog. And I was terrified he was going to put his hip out. Yeah. He looked like particularly since the day before I watched Goodfellas, where him and Pesci beat up Billy Batts, and De Niro's putting a boot in, like really. This looked ludicrous, and I just felt like it just took me out of the film. So if he wouldn't have done that, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, he would never have done that. He would have cast age-appropriate people to play the part. I mean, in Goodfellas, when you first meet De Niro, he's Jimmy Connolly, he's meant to be in his 20s. Clearly he's not, he's in his 40s. But you get away with it because it's only for a short period of time, then he's moving on in age group anyway. But here, these guys are well into their 70s. I think Pacino is 80 next year. So they're having to play these. I mean, and
it really affects the point that you're jumping around in time as well. Yeah. And that doesn't work. The only way I was figuring out that we were jumping around in the timeline was the age of the daughters.
Yeah. Well,
because looking at them,
only has one line, doesn't she? In the entire
yeah.
I think one of the confusing bits is that when Joe Pesci first meets De Niro, he calls him kid.
Yeah.
He's about 50. We're talking about. It's just ridiculous.
It is, but it's a tough thing to get past, that kind of suspension of disbelief. But we have, to be fair, got used to seeing kind of young people playing old people, and so there are certain kind of norms in
Once Upon a Time in America, where De Niro plays himself in his 60s.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. The makeup's brilliant. His performance, the way he moves himself, he totally sells it. I don't think you can go back the other way.
No, but the only thing is, I would say, when you stop trying to look at it just as a complete retelling of something, and think of it more like a kind of like an old relative telling you a story where they play out the parts or something like that. It's almost like a, you know, like a weird kabuki kind of play where they've got these masks on. You know, it's just, you need that suspension of disbelief to kind of invest yourself in it. And once you get there, once you get towards the characters, the longer time and the ability to kind of flesh out those characters, I did kind of appreciate. It's just it's tough getting over that initial hurdle.
That was the tough bit and pacing for me. But the final act of the film, I think, is superb. I really enjoyed the final
the last
act
half an hour. They're all just really, really old and dying.
Yeah, but I liked that aspect of it. You know, where
At least they were playing their correct ages.
Yeah, but it was also, you know, was it worth what they'd gone through? You know, was it all worth what they had gone through? Was it worth losing his daughter? Was it worth, you know, basically losing his family because he went to see his other daughter and she wanted nothing to do with him because he hadn't realised what an absolute horror he'd been, you know, to live with and all the rest of it. And he was asked whether he regretted stuff, and it was the fact that he didn't regret it. He thought it was worth what he'd. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it, and I thought that's one bit of the gangster universe we haven't really seen. We haven't really seen how they deal with old age. Yeah,
we're interviewing him and going, look, just tell us what happened because everybody else is dead. You're the only one left.
I really liked that angle.
It was a good film, and like I say, I mean, it was worth it just to see Joe Pesci back on the screen.
He was
long, and he was so good in it.
It's got that sense of getting the band back together.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of smell the glove is big in Japan, and this is it.
But like you say, Steve, if he'd actually cast younger actors to play them when they were younger,
and have them playing them when they're older,
and then have them playing them older, I think it would made more sense. Jumping around on the timeline would have been a lot easier to
because you know which actor. Okay, we're back to him, so that's fine.
So it would have made things, I think, and taken an hour out, at least an hour out of it, would have made it, I think, a more commercially acceptable movie. But like you say, I think because he's doing it for Netflix, and like what Mark said, it's the last time we're going to see all these guys together, and I guess he just wanted to bathe in that and see what come out of it. So yeah, but it's worth watching. Even if you can't get through it in one sitting, it's definitely worth watching.
And it looks great.
With Dolby Vision as well.
Beautifully shot film. And a nice soundtrack too. I mean, not as many hit songs as I was expecting, but even so, yes. I mean, I did enjoy it.
And you can tell
I didn't really have an issue with the length either because I was sat on the sofa, had a cup of tea. I think that would be more of an issue if you've been in the cinema for 3.5 hours, but. In the comfort of your own home with every toilet breaks.
That's maybe why I found it easier to switch it off and come back to it because I think if I was sitting in the cinema I wouldn't have any choice. I'd have to sit.
3.5 hours sat in a cinema seat would have been uncomfortable.
Yeah, it would have been.
Yeah, particularly at my age when I've got to go to the loo every 10 minutes.
Yeah, but I mean,
tell me about it.
Coming back to the film that we discussed earlier on, so obviously coming back to Knives Out, and I said there was nothing memorable about that. Watching this, there was lots of memorable stuff. There was lots of scenes. There was lots of paintings.
One thing. You know when he keeps doing the thing where like you'd see some, you know, historically accurate gangster, and it would sort of freeze frame and go shot 4 times in the head in 1980. Yeah. I kept thinking, don't tell me, show me. Would have livened up a little bit, you know. Every now and then a nice little hit. Because the hits they did show, generally the ones involving De Niro's character, were quite well done and quite brutal. Which is good.
Yeah, but there was, again, the way he moves the camera, the way he sets some of the shots up, some of them looked absolutely beautiful. You know, even though you're dealing with somebody having their head blown off, just the way he places the camera, you could tell he's an absolute artist when it comes to directing a film and choosing his shots. And in fact, he did it at 1:85:1 as well. It worked really nicely as well. So yeah,
and it is quite funny at times too. Think about like, you know, I'm a little bit worried when someone says that, they're really worried.
Yeah, a little bit concerned. No, we're really concerned.
Really concerned. Yeah, and it was whispers, not that whispers, the nice whispers. Who he then goes and shoots.
Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely worth going to watch, even if you can't get through it in one sitting. It's easy to break it up, and you don't lose too much. And like Mark said, it's probably the last time we're going to see all of them together on the screen. So yeah, definitely And it was a bit of a coup for Netflix, really, that.
And unless Scorsese does make that film version of Last of Summer Wine, in which case I think he's got the ideal cast for it.
And on that's it for this week's podcast. Thanks for making it through. It's another feature-length episode. My thanks to Ed Selley.
This guy could up a cup of coffee.
Steve Withers.
I really think you're overreacting.
And Mark Botwright.
In, out, hello, goodbye.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums.com for the latest reviews, news and video. Plus, why not leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. Also, head over and check out our YouTube channel for videos on the latest product launches and reviews, and feel free to subscribe while you're there. I'm Phil Hinton, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.